the 10-year-old me really disliked love songs. But then it was transformed into a song of devotion to God. This is what we're learning here. Whatever we do, how to take the Lord's energy, which is very bewildering, and transform it into devotion. Take whatever we have. What was Arjuna? What did he go through on the battlefield? First thing Krishna tells him, I'm going to use New Jersey language, not Gita language. You big dummy, what are you doing thinking you're this body? Get your act together. Stop your nonsense. That's New Jersey language for what the Gita is saying. I even could get a little rougher, but I'm in a religious class, so I have to watch my tongue. I was going to say dumbass, but I didn't. So I did say it. So this is the essence. What the Gita is saying, Arjuna, you're not this body. And what does Krishna spend the rest of the Gita doing? Modes of nature, how you interact with the world, what's going on, connecting with the body. Wait, which is it? I'm this body or I'm not this body? When I first read the Gita, that one bewildered me. First, you're telling me I'm not this body. Then you're telling me, figure out your nature. This is what we call a paradox. See, we're back to paradox now. How do we resolve this paradox? That song tells you how to resolve the paradox. By using your nature. Find out what your nature is. Whatever your nature is. And then use that in Krishna's service. So the first thing you have to do is become detached from your bodily concept. That's why when you join an ashram, you sometimes get a different haircut or change your name, you change your clothing, you do things to get out of this concept. I'm little Joey, I'm little Deepak, I'm little whatever I am. Your parents, cute guy, all this, cute girl. And kind of break that concept. But then we reconnect, but in the mood of service. So the first thing is the tapasya, because Brahma had to do the tapasya first to reconnect. So he sat and meditated there's a calculation in here, it's 1,000 celestial years. I mean, it's a long, long, long time. It could be 1 billion years. I don't remember the calculation now, but anybody know that number? 2.1 million? Okay, thank you. Long, long time. So he's meditating. Then now he's understanding what the purpose is. Now he can do his work as Brahma. But he was still Brahma. He's not God. And later on, there's a story in the Bhagavatam where he got into some trouble, as we might say, slipped on a banana peel. So the royal road has potholes in it. It can have potholes. So just because one does the tapasya doesn't mean that I can do whatever I want now. It means we have to be cautious on the royal road. That's another lesson herein. So the final point for today's class, then we'll get to questions and comments and all, is there is discussion in the purport that's kind of interesting. Here we are. Persons with a poor fund of knowledge become illusioned, and therefore so-called scientists, physiologists, empiric philosophers become dazzled by the glaring reflection of the sun, moon, electricity, and deny the existence of the Supreme Lord, putting forth theories and different speculations about the creation, maintenance, and annihilation of everything. The medical practitioner may deny the existence of the soul and the physiological bodily construction of an individual person, but he cannot give life to a dead body, even though all the mechanisms, all the chemicals, everything's there. exist even after death. So the psychologist may make a serious study of the psychological conditions of the brain, as if the construction of the cerebral lump were the machine of the functioning mind. But in the dead body, the psychologist cannot bring back the function of the mind. Now, why is this? I'm going to bring this up in a context. Several weeks ago, there was a convention in Barcelona. The name of the convention is called The Science of Consciousness. And this convention has 500, 1,000 of the top people in the world. The keynote speaker, one of them was the very famous Deepak Chopra. Gave a kind of boring lecture and then blew all the questions. Why? Because he doesn't recognize the personality of Godhead. Mayavadi, intelligent guy, charismatic, charming, and illusioned. At this convention 3 years ago, we finally got our foot in the door and had a poster session. This year, we had 9 devotees speaking, including 2 session chairs. It was huge. This is a Bhaktivedanta Institute project. The head of the convention, Stuart Hamroff, is actually a friend of devotees. His best friend since college days is a devotee, and that was quite helpful. So we've done some joint work and established a trusting relationship. His feeling is that if you study the microtubulars of the brain, there's a quantum effect going on. And I'm not kidding. Now, in his slideshow, he flashes on the screen, bing, and that's consciousness. No, that's bing. Consciousness means my self-understanding. I know I'm conscious. I don't know, I can't prove that any of you, especially some of you, are not AI robots. I can't prove that. I can know myself. But since I see a lot of similarities, I can make that by using the proper Pramana inference. Anybody here an AI robot? Okay. Anybody know the Turing test? Tell us if you're not, we won't go into that now. There's not time. It always speaks it. Yeah, I know. I like that. So at this convention, the question was, can, as Prabhupada's talking, scientists, physiologists, physicists, and all, can they get to the point of understanding what consciousness is? Now, 10 years ago, almost everyone at this convention was a physicalist. What is a physicalist? That consciousness is simply an emanation from your neurons. And the neurons between the ears. So you have as many neurons in your gut as you do between your ears. When we say my gut feeling, that is not just a figure of speech. And it is not just a sign of indigestion. It has some real intuition to it. So it can be a sign of indigestion, especially after a spicy Sunday feast, but that's a different matter. So 10 years ago, it was like that. Now, it's changed now, where the non-physicalists, those who understand the mind is not an emanation from the brain, but the brain is the interface for the mind to act with the world, have become maybe a third or 40% of the people attending. There's a sea change going on now in this world. And many organizations who the Bhaktivedanta Institutes are now affiliated with, establishing relationships with, are starting to get that, except for one point. What point don't they get? Yeah, in a big sense, but in a smaller sense, you're right. He's pointing on to God. But one point they don't get is personalism. They're all impersonalists because they say it's panpsychic. There's consciousness everywhere, but I can't account for free will at all. They can't explain things such as free will. Everything, if everything is predetermined, then there is no free will. The book just came out by this philosopher Spolaski, there is no free will. And how the hell did he write the book? Okay. And other Mayavadis say words don't say anything, so shut up. Okay, I got it. I mean, I hear that all the time. Okay, fine, shut up, great. I was hoping you would say that and follow it. So there's a change. Last year, David Chalmers, anybody heard of David Chalmers? He's a very well-known philosopher at New York University, very well known. And he came up with a phrase, and that phrase is the vogue phrase for discussing consciousness. And here's what he called it: the hard problem of consciousness. It's because he said we can't really resolve it materially. We have to. He's a philosopher. We have to resolve it philosophically. And of course, he says, "But I haven't resolved it yet." But last year at the same conference, he gave the keynote address, and there we had 5 devotees speaking. The year before, we had just 1 poster session, so we've gone up in our ranks. And he gave a talk, and after this talk, he said, "I am giving the keynote address for 30 years of the science of consciousness. And I'm so honored to be speaking at the 30th anniversary of this talk." You were there, Gandhi, weren't you? Yeah. And tell me if I get it wrong. David Chalmers said, "My journey began not 30 years ago, began 34 years ago, when the Bhaktivedanta Institute invited me to speak on consciousness in San Francisco." So we're trying, we've been at this for a long time, but we're actually making some real progress now. We're getting known. We've been around a while and saying the same thing, but where do we get our information from? Same place Brahma gets it from. Ultimately, we're getting our information from the Shastra. Then we do scientific experiments to demonstrate that this is so, because the world believes in science, so we have to demonstrate it. I'll give you an example of an experiment that was done in Barcelona. You may have trouble believing this, but this was done by our group from Indian Institute of Technology in Monday. They're doing their PhD on this, and a different group based in Europe, unrelated to us, both presented the same topic this year. This sound a little hocus pocus, but it's true, and I've seen it. There's a way to train students up until about the age mid-teenager. Doesn't work after that for reasons we don't know. These students are trained. Takes a few weeks of training, and here's what they do. You give them a book like this. Here's a book. You put on a blindfold that's absolutely a blindfold. And make it double, you cover the page with a black cloth that no light can get through. Somebody random picks the page in the book, opens it. Anyone guess what happens next? They start reading the book. I'm not kidding. This is real. They start reading the book. Now, this is being presented in front of 800 scientists by 2 different groups, done independently. Quite an amazing phenomenon. Why is this phenomenon important? Because it shows that that the visual perception is not just a product of the brain, but there's a subtle body that is doing this. How this works, I don't even quite understand it. I'm not pretending to, but these things are real. So sometimes we take the Bhagavatam version as presented here, and then we do some science to kind of show that it really works. Now, this is dangerous because there's a lot of fraudulent science and magicians, and people who do trickery and all these things. One of my habits is to do a little amateur magician work, not so good at it, but is seeing how magicians, how they make someone float, how they cut Jaina Shringa in half and you still hear, things like that. So there definitely is an area of cheating and trickery, but there's also an area of reality. And we have to distinguish that and do double-blind studies in areas that need scrutiny to demonstrate it. So we're almost done with class. So I'm going to summarize what we did here. These are the answer, very critical chapter, answers by citing the Lord's version. Okay, what does Krishna say? And here in 4 verses, Lord Vishnu is saying to Brahma, whatever appears to be of value, if without relationship to me, has no reality. Know it as my illusory energy, that reflection which appears to be in darkness. And he's saying, look everywhere. Whatever you're doing, look everywhere and try to understand things in relationship to me. And if so, then you will have done this tapasya, this penance, and bring yourself to higher consciousness. And the science of consciousness, the one point they miss is how to raise your consciousness. Because all the scientists and scholars and philosophers are there. The one point they don't know is without tapasya, they're not going to understand. They have to engage. And that's why our devotees are so powerful, because they may be speaking at a convention, but every morning they're getting up, doing their prayers, chanting, eating better, doing those things that raise the consciousness. So we'll stop here. Is there any questions, comments, reflections? Yes, we'll begin with presence.
So this is actually a question that I had yesterday, but I think you're the appropriate person to answer it.
I'll speak up a little louder.
Oh, so I had this question yesterday, but it feels, I don't know, it feels appropriate for the idea, like we're thinking in paradox and we're thinking in Achinta, Beta Beta Tattva. By the way, thank you for this class. You're always so funny. It's my favorite. Also, okay. Sister Act is my favorite, one of my favorite movies as a child. So that was a great joy for me. Okay. So my question is, sometimes I have this thought where I'm like, okay, so Krishna is the infinite creator of this universe and all universes, but like, is it possible that he is a part of like a community of infinite creators? Sometimes I have that thought, like, and then are there infinite creators beyond him? And is this a blasphemous thought? But I sometimes wonder about this.
Well, the question is, if God created us, who created God? Yeah. And so Aristotle dealt with this. And he had the same question. So you and Aristotle have something in common. Okay. And his conclusion, which is the basis of all Western philosophy, is there has to be a unmoved mover. There has to be a beginning. You cannot do an infinite regression and you end up with nothing. So an infinite regression doesn't work. Now, in here, there's a very interesting picture on the first canto. You've probably all seen it. Many universes emanating. Somebody just wrote me yesterday, asked a BI question. What about the Big Bang? And funny thing is, the Big Bang was a joke. Some priest who was studying cosmology came up with the term Big Bang as a joke, and it caught on. It wasn't intended to be a term, but it's there. The current theory of cosmology is before the Big Bang, there had to be something, because there's all these numbers that wouldn't work, like the Planck constant, the speed of light. There's all these numbers that are very precisely in place, and they're off in the 20th decimal place by 1 digit. Mathematically, the universe doesn't work. So before this so-called Big Bang, there had to be intelligence, which means mind. So even the cosmology community is recognizing something was there. Now they're seeing this as a cyclic universe. The current theory is the universe expands and contracts, over billions of years. Gee, sounds exactly like the Bhagavatam version. Exactly. That's what the Bhagavatam says. So the universe comes and goes in the material world. There is also what was being revealed to Brahma. There is a spiritual world beyond it. That, to know things beyond our senses, sometimes we have to accept it from better authority. The famous example Prabhupada used to give, and he gave this example before DNA analysis exists, so put it in that context. If you want to know who your father is, again, before DNA existed, what was the one authority that could tell you? Your mother. You know, because your mother may have been, you know, around the block. We don't know. Only she knows if she's been around the block or not. You know, just be certain. So you got to trust your mother. Yeah, that's your dad. How come I don't look like him at all? I remember I don't remember this, but I was told I was in the nursery after being born. My uncle walks up, still traumatized me. I guess I must have heard it somehow. Said to my father, Charlie, that can't be your kid. And I was told I look like the milkman. So who knows? But I had a good mother and that didn't happen. But I was told that. This was quite traumatizing for a kid. So if we want to really get a proper authority, who do we approach? And I did look like the milkman. That's the weird part. Anyway, if you want to get I used to deliver milk to the houses in the old days. If you wanted to get a proper authority, you had to, you know, find. In this case, it was the mother. Nowadays, it's probably a DNA lab, but still, the point is, you go to a proper authority. So that's the point being made here. Hope that answers your question. So one more question. Yes. Whoever has it, take a microphone.
Hare Krishna Prabhu. Thank you for the class today. One of the things that I struggle with when in conversations with so-called Indians educated in the Western system is an acceptance of unfalsifiable claims. So anytime a question comes that they seem to not be able to answer with scientific evidence, say, oh, you're talking about an unfalsifiable claim, so you can't prove it false, so that means there is something wrong with the underlying question, and I cannot get past that point to, you know, kind of discuss deeper topics. So how do you deal with it?
A very good question. Unfalsifiable claim in scientific terms means let's say I make the claim that the third moon on Saturn is made of green cheese. Okay, now I've made that claim, but you can't falsify it because there's no way to go to the third moon of Saturn with current technology and extract a piece to see if it's green cheese or rock. So that's an unfalsifiable claim. Is that a fair example? Okay, so the question is, are our claims unfalsifiable claims? So I'll answer it from two angles. That's a very important question. One, they're not necessarily unfalsifiable. For example, Brahma was able to get realization. There are different ways of getting knowledge. If anyone thinks that the only way of getting knowledge is through your senses, then it's very limited the knowledge you can get. I'll put it in a context. I want to know what the temperature is outside today, besides too hot. So I need the right tool. I'm not going to use this microphone to tell me the temperature, unless I'm speaking Siri. I'm not going to use this microphone. I'm going to use a thermometer. But we need the right tools. So those things that are lesser than us, material things, we can examine, microscope, telescope, laboratory, and we can test it out. But what about things greater than us? Is there a different method of learning? We'll give an example. Let's say the governor is visiting the town. Now, I cannot just walk in and say, hey, Gov, how you doing? He's surrounded by law enforcement agents, yes, assistant staff. If I want to get to see him, I have to do something to please him. Sadly, it means giving a lot of money to his campaign contributions. That's how you get to see him. That's the truth. Say again? Yeah, something like that. Actually, I knew him personally, but he turned out to be a decent guy. But that's another story. He improved with age. And so if I want to see the governor, I don't want to see the president. So I don't like using that example. But that's Voldemort. But anyway, if I want to see somebody important, I have to please them. So there's a different method of getting knowledge. So when they say it has to be falsifiable, they're limiting to only things lesser than them. And they're throwing out the entire epistemology, theory of knowledge, of how to learn about things greater, even though in their daily life, they're doing it all the time. So it's quite, that's not paradoxical, that's contradictory. So I hope that helps. Here's a second, I'll tell you a story that that relates to Indians. And this might help with your Indian friends. When I spoke at the first international conference on life comes from life in 1977, Prabhupada was too ill to attend, but every night called us into his room. What were our arguments and what were their arguments? Because we brought in materialistic scientists. And one fellow came from the University of New Delhi. And he had, anybody hear the Ig Nobel Prize? It's a joke prize awarded for the stupidest scientific experiment, as opposed to the Nobel Prize. This guy was, I swear, a candidate for Ig Nobel, because he came up with a way of solving the information problem of evolution. I won't go into it, but it's a problem of how do you go from simple to complex and how does more information enter the system. So he came up with a solution, and the solution wasn't very good. But he thought it was brilliant. He was kind of patting himself on the back. So he gave his talk. And after his talk, our Sadhaputta challenged him in the mathematics, which he really couldn't answer, but he fumbled around. And there were questions from the audience. And finally, one lady's raising her hand. And he won't call on her. But it's the only hand left, so he has to call on her. This can only happen in India. No other place in the world could this ever happen. She stands up, doesn't face him, faces the audience, and said, my husband, who just gave that atheistic nonsense lecture, I want you all to know at night he offers arti. Prabhupada liked that story. So Indians are like that. They're very atheistic during the day, and at night they offer arti, because in their hearts they're brought up in this advanced culture, and there's something they know that what we're saying is true, but they want to pretend it's not. And I find that over and over again. I just was visiting a devotee. He's in his late 80s. In the early 80s, he walked in the Miami temple. He's a Indian doctor. And he walked into the temple. And it was his birthday, and he didn't want to go. But his wife dragged him. Every birthday he has to go to the temple. And I greeted him and talked to him. And we became best friends, became a life member, got initiated, became a Brahmin, treated devotees. He's well retired now. And he was sick. I was visiting him recently. And when he came, he was a born again, typical atheist. Indian atheist. I'm a doctor, all this mumbo jumbo, we don't need it. But his wife was very devotional. And he said, I've gone to the temple every year for my birthday the last 5 years, and no one talked to me. Shocking. I talked to him. Immediately we became friends. And he became a wonderful devotee. He understood. He's a cardiologist. He understood. I see people die, just as it said in that report. And I know that I can't bring that body back. Something left. The intuitive knowledge was overwhelmed his atheism. And that's because he took up devotional service. So that's the lesson here. I hope that answers your question. It's a very important question. Okay, we'll stop here because I've gone over time and I'm taking you all from breakfast. Thank you very much. Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna.